In this video, I'm going to talk about integrating on-premises Active Directory with your Azure AD, talking about Azure Active Directory Connect, and also talking about the difference with Active Directory Federation services. Let me start with describing what Azure Active Directory Connect is. Azure Active Directory Connect, or AD Connect in short, is an identity directory synchronization tool running in your on-premises environment and allowing synchronization from on-premises Active Directory environment, which in meantime can be multiple forests, multiple domains, into a single Azure Active Directory environment. When defining, installing, and configuring your AD Connect tool, it provides you granular configuration options. You can specify which individual forests and domains you want to synchronize, or specifying up to Active Directory OU level which users you want to synchronize, or based on UPN suffix, or a list of custom fields you can select from. Next to that, there's also an Azure AD Connect synchronization service tool that's installed at the same time as Azure AD Connect on your on-prem environment, providing you a detailed view on the sync state and even the health state of your AD Connect synchronization tool. So from a graphical perspective, it looks a little bit like this. So on the left-hand side, we do have Windows Active Directory or any other identity system which is compatible. You deploy Azure AD Connect in the on-prem environment, can be a domain member or a standalone one. During the configuration, it will ask you for your domain credentials anyway, and then synchronizing with your Azure Active Directory environment. And then from there on, as I explained you in the previous video in this module, it will allow you to reuse your Azure AD credentials, user accounts to authenticate against those public cloud applications. Now, when talking about Azure Active Directory and authentication, another technical feature that I need to highlight is using Active Directory Federation services, or ADFS. ADFS is technology that's running on top of a Windows Server operating system, which requires to be installed in an on-prem forest or on-prem domain. On top of that, from a security perspective, you deploy Active Directory proxy servers, which basically are web front-end servers in your DMZ network, providing additional security. Out of an ADFS scenario, all authentication validation happens against the on-premises Active Directory domain servers. And Azure Active Directory passwords are never being used. Although it's an option that you can provide Active Directory synchronization towards Azure Active Directory, including password sync. And then in case of your ADFS servers being down, users can still log on using their Azure AD stored password. Another approach when you're having site-to-site VPN or express route connectivity to Azure is, instead of deploying ADFS in your on-premises network, is deploying additional virtual machines in Azure and configuring them as ADFS servers, basically allowing direct connection to the rest of the Azure environment that you're building, or from there re-authenticating against those public cloud applications. So with that, I'm going to jump again to another demo, quickly walking you through the configuration of Azure Active Directory Connect in an on-prem scenario. So in this demo, I want to walk you through Azure Active Directory. So as mentioned in the module, Azure Active Directory is mainly to be managed from the old portal manage.windowsazure.com. From within the portal, I go to my Active Directory and select my Azure Active Directory environment. One of the things that I can show you here is my user list. So I do have a couple of user accounts where you can allocate some of these users, local Active Directory, another user account, Azure Active Directory, local Active Directory, and again another one, Azure Active Directory. So interesting enough is that my Azure Active Directory
has a combination of local Active Directory accounts, actually on-premises Active Directory accounts that are being synchronized, or even, as you can see here, using Microsoft accounts. Besides my users, I also do have a couple of synchronized Active Directory groups, and I can also configure my multi-factor authentication, which we will cover later on in this module, specifying how group management needs to be handled, doing some custom branding, allowing device registration, Azure Active Directory device join, and using the functionality of application proxy, also one of the features that I'm going to cover later on in this module. And if I want to enable domain services, Active Directory, Azure Active Directory domain services, yes or no. Besides the Azure portal, I want to show you Azure Active Directory Connect, or the previous tool was also called DearSync, allowing you to synchronize your on-premises Active Directory environments to Azure Active Directory. Everything is already configured, but I just quickly want to walk you through the configuration. So it starts with asking for your Azure AD tenant, admin credentials, followed by your local Active Directory credentials. So here it's recognizing my Active Directory and asking for my Active Directory domain, username and password. It's recognizing my Active Directory topology. For now it's defined as synchronizing all domains and all OUs, but I can quickly show you that it's also possible to only select specific organizational units. In the next step, I can opt in for certain attributes like password hash synchronization and password writeback. Confirming my settings, and the AD Connect tool will verify my settings and starting the synchronization process again. Since everything was already up and running, I can close my configuration here, and I can open up another tool. It's installed at the same time as the Azure AD Connect. It's the Azure AD synchronization service. So the first one is the configuration, the second part is the synchronization itself. As you can see here, every 20 to 30 minutes there's a delta synchronization happening, and on the other side in Azure AD a delta import. You can also detect against which domain controller your server is using for synchronizing, and that's the easy way to find out if the synchronization is working fine or not. Obviously, if anything should go wrong with the synchronization, you could also detect it from here, since it would be in a failed state.
Now with that, I'm finished with the introduction on Azure Active Directory, and I would like to go over to the next video, in which I'm going to specifically talk about the integration of your on-premises Active Directory with Azure AD in the cloud.